December 19, 1944, 7:30 in the morning. A frantic German radio operator at 2nd Panzer Division headquarters pressed his headset closer, certain he had misheard. Panther tank crews near the frozen village of Noville were screaming into their radios about American tanks appearing from nowhere, ghost vehicles that would materialize from the swirling fog, punch a single devastating round through a Panther's side armor, then vanish into the white void before any turret could swing around to answer. Seconds later, another strike would come from an entirely different direction. Then, another. German intelligence scrambled to make sense of the chaos. Their official report concluded that they had stumbled into an entire American armored division. Dug in around Noville. They needed reinforcements. They needed air support. They needed everything available. They were completely wrong. The Americans defending that frozen crossroads had no division. They had a handful of tank destroyers that weighed less than half of a Panther. Vehicles wrapped in steel so thin that their own crews called it a metal coffin on treads. One direct hit from anything larger than a rifle would rip straight through. But here is the part that still haunts military historians 80 years later. The Germans could not land that hit. The M18 Hellcat was the fastest armored vehicle of the entire Second World War. And on that bitter December morning, in the frozen hell surrounding Bastogne, raw speed proved more lethal than any amount of armor plating. The German war machine had engineered the most terrifying tanks the world had ever seen. The Tiger, the Panther, steel beasts capable of destroying Allied armor from distances exceeding a mile. Their frontal plates could shrug off nearly anything the Allies could throw at them. But buried deep within these mechanical monsters was a vulnerability that German engineers never managed to solve. And it would cost them dearly. Their turrets depended entirely on the main engine for power. The Tiger I used a hydraulic traverse system connected directly to the gearbox. When the engine screamed at high RPM, the turret could complete a full 360-degree rotation in roughly 60 seconds. But tanks do not fight at high engine speed. They fight while stationary or crawling forward at walking pace with engines barely idling. At idle, that same Tiger turret could take nearly 4 minutes to complete a single rotation. And if the hydraulic system failed, as it often did in the frozen conditions, crews had to crank by hand. 720 agonizing turns of a metal wheel just to swing the gun around once. The Panther performed somewhat better, but still carried the same fatal flaw. At combat idle, traversing just 90 degrees required 15 to 20 seconds of vulnerable exposure. This was not a minor design compromise. This was a death sentence against the right kind of enemy. If you are finding this story incredible so far, take a moment to hit the like button. It helps more people discover these forgotten moments in history. 3 years earlier, in 1941, a sharp-minded lieutenant colonel named Andrew Davis Bruce took command of the tank destroyer Tactical and Firing Center at Fort Hood. His orders were straightforward. Figure out how to stop German armor from rolling across Europe unopposed. Bruce approached the problem like a detective studying crime scene photographs. He analyzed every single engagement, where Allied tanks had faced German Panzers and lost. He reviewed after-action reports. He interviewed survivors. He ran simulations. And after months of obsessive study, he reached a conclusion that contradicted everything conventional military thinking believed. About armored warfare, tank destroyers should be fast, not armored. A boxer, not a brawler. Strike and disappear. Never stand and trade punches. His reasoning was elegant in its brutality. German tanks possessed thick frontal armor and devastating main guns. Any vehicle that attempted to face them head-on was choosing suicide. But German tanks were also slow. Their turrets were even slower, and their side armor was dangerously thin. A vehicle fast enough could flank a Panzer before its turret completed its traverse. One shot into the vulnerable side, kill the tank, disappear before the rest of the column could even identify where the shot originated. The army brass thought Bruce had lost his mind. They built his vehicle anyway. But for the young men who would climb inside these machines and drive them into combat, Bruce's elegant theory translated into a terrifying reality. He was asking them to trade steel protection for raw velocity, to bet their lives on the mathematical probability that they could move faster than German gunners could aim. In 1942, Buick Motor Division received the contract to turn this insane theory into metal reality. They assigned the project to Harley Earl's legendary design studio, the same team that would later create the iconic tail-fin Cadillacs of the 1950s. What emerged from their workshops was unlike anything else in the American arsenal. The M18 weighed just 18 tons. For comparison, a Panther weighed 45 tons. A Tiger weighed 57. They achieved this featherweight status by stripping away almost everything that traditionally kept tank crews alive. The frontal hull was just 13 millimeters thick. The turret face was only marginally thicker at 25 millimeters. Standard infantry rifles could not penetrate it. Everything else absolutely could. When crews first laid eyes on those specifications, their reactions ranged from disbelief to outright horror. 13 millimeters was not armor. It was a suggestion of armor. Veterans joked grimly that the steel plating was only there to keep the wind from blowing through. Inside the cramped hull, you were not protected. You were simply hidden from view. The power plant was a Wright 975 radial engine, the exact same aircraft engine used in the Sherman tank, now installed in a vehicle weighing half as much. The result was a top speed of 55 miles per hour. The fastest tracked armored vehicle of the entire Second World War. They gave it a name that matched its savage personality, Hellcat. The mathematics of this machine told a story of calculated madness. At 30 miles per hour, an M18 Hellcat covered 44 feet every single second. During the 15 seconds a Panther crew needed to traverse their turret 90 degrees, that Hellcat would travel more than 600 feet. That was 200 yards of lateral movement, enough distance to stay perpetually ahead of the swinging gun barrel. German gunners faced an impossible calculation every time they spotted a Hellcat racing across their field of vision. Lead the target and pray it maintained its current course, or track it directly and watch helplessly as every round landed exactly where the target used to be a half second earlier. Either way, you were going to miss. And you would only get one attempt, because while you were still traversing, that Hellcat crew was already lining up a 76mm armor-piercing round on your exposed flank. At Bastogne, this brutal math would face its ultimate examination. The 705th Tank Destroyer Battalion found themselves attached to the legendary 101st Airborne Division at Bastogne when the German offensive exploded through the Ardennes. Their commanding officer was Lieutenant Colonel Clifford Templeton. When German armor from the 2nd Panzer Division threatened to overrun Neuville north of the perimeter, Templeton's Hellcats were ordered forward to Bastogne. They joined a desperate mixed force designated Team Desabry, Sherman's Hellcats, and paratroopers from the 506th Regiment. Their commander was Major William Desabry. He was 26 years old. He was about to face an entire Panzer division with a handful of undermanned vehicles. The fog that morning hung so dense that engagements happened at nearly point-blank range. At that distance, the Hellcats' paper-thin armor became a death sentence. But the Germans still had to hit them first. Inside those freezing Hellcats, the tension crushed down on every crew member. The M18 had an open top, no roof. The crew sat exposed to freezing rain, sniper fire, and the deafening chaos of armored combat. In that impenetrable fog, every shadow could be a tiger waiting to send them to oblivion. The 705th developed a fighting technique that would become legendary among armor historians. A Hellcat would race to a street corner in Neuville, crew scanning frantically through the mist. Spot a Panther, one shot directly into its flank, then full reverse at maximum throttle. By the time that Panther's turret completed its traverse to return fire, the Hellcat was already behind a building, down an alley, repositioning for its next attack. Seconds later, that same vehicle would materialize on the opposite side of the German column. Another shot, another kill, another disappearing act into the frozen void. The Germans could not track them. Every time they turned to engage one threat, another erupted from an entirely unexpected direction. Reports flowing back to 2nd Panzer Division headquarters grew increasingly desperate. Commanders became convinced they were facing a full American armored division. In reality, they were fighting a single reinforced battalion, a 26-year-old major, a handful of tank destroyers with fast feet and ice in their veins. But speed could not save everyone. With only 13 millimeters separating them from German shells, any hit was almost always fatal. German 75 millimeter rounds punched clean through both sides of the hull simultaneously. Crews caught in the open died instantly. Those who misjudged their timing by even a second died, and those who simply ran out of luck faced a gruesome end. The open turret meant that artillery airbursts or mortar rounds did not require direct hits to be lethal. Shrapnel rained straight down onto exposed men. It was the fastest ride in the war, but it became an open grave the moment you stopped moving. What happened next at Nouvelle deserves to be remembered. Share this video with someone who appreciates forgotten history, and drop a comment below telling me which WWI story you want me to cover next. Over December 19th and 20th, Team Desabrys and the 705th destroyed over 30 German tanks around Nouvelle. The village eventually fell. The American force was simply too small to withstand the full weight of an entire Panzer division. But they had purchased something invaluable. Critical hours for the 101st Airborne to establish the defensive perimeter. That would hold Bastogne against everything the Germans threw at it. Templeton survived the Battle of the Bulge. He continued commanding the 705th during the drive into Germany. On March 1, 1945, an artillery shell struck his command post. He never witnessed the victory his tactics helped secure. For months after Nouvelle, a different Hellcat battalion proved the same lethal math in spectacular fashion. The 805th Tank Destroyer Battalion was the only unit in Italy fully equipped with M18s. Their crews painted unauthorized black cat emblems on their turrets. Command ordered them removed. They refused. If they were going to die in these fragile machines, they would do it with their own identity. In April 1945, the Po Valley stretched ahead like a billiard table. German forces were streaming north in full retreat. What followed became known as the Rat Race. Hellcats found themselves driving parallel to retreating German columns, not pursuing from behind, racing alongside at 30 miles per hour, guns blazing into exposed flanks. By the war's end, M18 Hellcats had compiled the highest kill ratio of any American armored vehicle, 526 confirmed kills, an exchange ratio of 2.4-1. The critics argued that Hellcat crews were simply elite specialists who would have succeeded in any vehicle. Perhaps, but those men chose speed. They chose flanking. They chose hit and run because that is what the Hellcat allowed them to do. But conventional measures never accounted for an 18-ton Ghost. That could be somewhere else entirely. Before you finish turning your turret, if this story gave you chills, subscribe now and turn on notifications because next week, I am covering another incredible forgotten moment that changed everything.